So thanks, Montasser. So this presentation is going to basically take you through, imagine yesterday after we finished the discussions when we presented the 7 key actions. And I'm really amazed to see the energy and the ideas that came out. We wanted to take the temperature of the room to see what your thoughts were on some of those. And we really got very valuable feedback from you and input. So I'm just going to take you with Irina and I going to take you through some of the major things that we heard from you that we are going to be reflecting in the outcome document and going to the key actions. And we will have this document and our understanding of what needs to change available, and we will mail it to you, and you can also send us further comments. We're going to keep everything live and open till at least March 16, and for you to give us feedback and some of the, again, ideas that you think we have missed or we need further emphasis on. So we have 4 blocks of what we heard from you, and since you, one of you advised us to organize it under different headings, that's what we have done. We're not going to say who said what, because I'm sure I'll miss somebody's name, and you will be upset. So you probably recognize yourself in a lot of the comments that we will see. You want to do the first one? Or?
Yeah, I can do the first one. And so I think based on your very valuable comments yesterday, we are still having some work to do on mapping the audience. I mean, who is the audience for this document and how we are identifying the specific roles that the stakeholders are having into all this process at different level, be it a global level and the regional level. So because we are talking about this, but I think that most important part it is that the country governments, the country ownership process. So this has to be country-driven, country-led process, and how do we mobilize the governments into, making this a political priority into their, whatever it be, a national strategy of poverty reduction or whatsoever country development plan. I think that this is really critical, but it has to be really country-owned and country-led. And another thing which came out yesterday, it was about knowledge gaps and how do we close them. And having research at the core of everything we do, actually we should work closer with the communities. This is something which we still need to understand, to learn about it, to see where are the investments actually which need to be done, and how do we include the citizens into this CRVS process in building more human-centered CV registration systems that are gender sensitive so that they are inclusive and universal in the true sense of the word.
So the second group of,
it's not working?
Can you switch to the next slide? The second group of comments and suggestions that we heard from you is on where is the focus on human rights and data governance. We put them together to sort of make sure that this comes out clearly. And we heard that we need to increase the emphasis on gender throughout. After all, this is really about the CRVS through the gender lens, and particularly in some of the points 3 and 4 regarding gender equal access to civil documents. We also heard that we need to integrate stronger language in regards to adopting a rights-based approach to improve the CRVS system. And finally, stress the importance of data governance. We heard that from a number of you, particularly to prevent misuse of data and protecting privacy and assuring data quality through data quality assurance initiatives.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. The third one is, how does this fit in the larger population data ecosystem? There was very good comments that were made by a number of colleagues, and we heard from experts from the UN that we need to emphasize a stronger relationship between the legal ID system and CRVS system, and clarify, in some cases we mentioned ongoing ID initiatives. and highlight complementarity between census and CRVS, and the latter helping particularly on timeliness on information needed for policy making. Next slide.
And so next slide is about making the case for investing in civil registration and vital statistic systems, and it's about lowering the emphasis on the need for additional financing, but actually it's better making the case on return of investments. What are the return of investments in CRVS systems as against, for instance, investing into surveys, another mean of population estimates, and another most important part it is domestic resource mobilization as well. I mean, how do they, this finally is part of the entire governance systems of the country. So how do we mobilize domestic resources for the sustainability and reliability of these systems is critical as we are moving the conversation not only towards 2030, but beyond the 2030 idea, timing. And then, another thing is that distinguishing means to an end from the ends in themselves for CRVS. I mean, like data use, legal rights, identity for population, but also the important part of the conversation on empowering the citizens, the women, and the most vulnerable one to be part of this conversation, to access the services, and go towards the services. Because without this part of the conversation, we won't be able to achieve the milestones of the 2030 agenda. And finally, move, as you said, I mean, Shaida was putting it up on moving financing at the list, at the end of the list of all these commitments, as a matter of fact. So,
or maybe a separate case, but so we are open to other revisions, as I said, and we encourage that you give us feedback and any other inputs that you have. And we have this, you're familiar by now on that famous website where many of you have been getting a lot of email from crvs-gender@opendatawatch.com. So we really welcome you, and we will remind you based on the participants list of sending us comments if you have. So these 4 slides were basically to give you an idea of what we've heard. 2 of our very, very dedicated staff members, Lawrence Noe and Deirdre Pell, for the past 4 or 5 hours, have been going through all the comments that you have provided and summarized this. And the rest of us here, as you saw us, we were not playing games on our computer. We were trying to go and make sure that all your inputs are reflected in these slides and going into the outcome document.
Perhaps maybe one thing to add here, I think that there are some important, steps which are taken through the UN legal identity agenda and how we are moving forward and how the UN intends to move forward with the member states. And I think that perhaps this is a part of the conversation which we might like to reflect in the commitments as we are moving forward and see how we can actually work with the UN systems and with the country governments to, accelerate progress towards 2030.
We are done.
Thank you very much. Was there a slide on the evaluation? Is that
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll speak to that later. Okay, Arjan, we'll talk about that later. Maybe I'll do the evaluation later at the end.
Please share your feedback, for sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Montasser, and thank you, everybody. Again, we're so happy to see you all. We are so happy to see you that we've decided to keep you a little longer, perhaps. That's why we arranged for the snowstorm tonight, and you'll see that what a great atmosphere Ottawa tomorrow morning will be. Actually, I now know why we do this in February. That the snowstorm is just the excuse. As our parliamentary secretary said, 2020 is something of a gender super year. And that refers to all the initiatives around CSW, of course, generation equality, all the initiatives around data for development that are happening this year. And we knew all that, so that's why we decided to do this in February, so that we're all prepared to take what we've learned here to all those different venues. And I think we are, after this conference, I certainly feel that we're much better prepared to take those messages forward. For me, there's been an incredible amount of learning, and I just want to thank everybody for contributing to that, and also to say how proud we are to work on the Canadian commitment, as Joshua and the parliamentary secretary spoke to, as the champions of CRVS. And as the parliamentary secretary said, and as you all know, CRVS systems are a cornerstone for human development, rights, and security. It is equally important, and vice versa, important for gender equality. And of course, the Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy deepens that commitment to CRVS, and I think the work that we're jointly doing is contributing to creating the evidence base for gender-sensitive and equitable policies and programs to make sure that everyone is counted, everyone counts, and that no one is left behind. And I think the Center of Excellence, the work that's being done, for example, with the policy brief series, enhances that evidence base on the gender impacts of existing systems and on reducing women's barriers to registration, for example. So as I said, I think the discussions we've had here, I'm confident that it helps us prepare for the next steps. I think somebody used the expression that we started to walk 2-3 years ago, that we're now ready to run. Tomorrow morning it will be skiing, so it will be even faster. And let me just, and there may be a little bit of repetition, but there are about 3 things I wanted to highlight, and maybe for Joshua's benefit, and also referring to the points you made and the challenges you brought out of the kind of things that we're taking forward. As I think Irina already said, a clear recognition that governments need to be in the driver's seats of the systems that we're talking about. CRVS need to be integrated in national plans, the issues of national resources for these, and how the international community can contribute to that, leverage that, improve that are absolutely on people's mind. And I think a lot of progress has been made. The second thing, I think we started talking off talking about interoperability, and I think that debate has gotten broadened over time, and talking about the many different, say, data for development initiatives that are taking place, new forms of data collection, new ID system, voter registration, legal identity. I think there's a clear recognition that all these are important. CRVS is a very important part of that, and that the strength of the work will come in the collaboration across those the initiatives and people working on that. And similarly, a lot of the work is based in the health of CRVS is based in the health sector. From the presentations, we clearly see how much more needs to be done. There are still maps that are completely gray, where no relevant data is, for example, to describe gender, for example, gender inequality and other forms of inequality, but that these questions are equally relevant, and that the collaboration with other line ministries, say, are equally important. And with that, and I think when the moment you say interoperability and talk about the new forms of ID systems and so on, the dangers of data also are very much on people's mind, and that as we work on closing the gaps on data, that the issue of governance of data, who controls that, are equally important, and that more work across a range of people working in this field is important and will be taken forward. And then finally, we came back a lot too, but I think we can never say enough that the efforts are squarely about making sure that women and children are not left invisible, stateless, left out of services, and so on, and that therefore is also about the rights of those women and those left behind. And there was a lot of discussion, very interesting, what the systems mean at community levels, how important social norms are, how they interact with CRVS systems, and so on, and how the creation of ownership at national level, but also with citizen community, is an absolutely priority for this work. So with that, I just want to say thank you to Shaida, Irina, colleagues at GAC, at UNFPA. I think it's been there's been an incredible amount of learning, and I clearly see that we're making huge steps to take this agenda forward. Thank you.
Arjan, and thank you for being brief as well. I know everyone will appreciate that. Benoit, it's on to you.
Merci.
Please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I was advised just to make a vote of thanks. But before doing that, I just want to offer 2 or 3 reflections as takeaway from this 2 days meeting. One is we discussed a lot about systems strengthening, improving data, but the most important is beyond the systems, beyond the data, there are people. So how do we design CRVS systems that are gender sensitive, but through which we see them as a means to improving or delivering on the promises of the SDGs, the ICPD, or the Beijing platform. I think that's what we need. And in doing so, for multilateral, being the WHO, UNICEF, UNFPA, IDRC as a center of excellence, how do we connect to programs? Between UNICEF and UNFPA, I would like to see how the CRVS improvement or coverage will prevent or assist us preventing child marriage. How are we going to decrease the vulnerability of a woman to be cut? How are we going to prevent maternal death? How are we going to prevent adolescent childbirth? I think it is when we connect to those programs that we speak business, that we build solid business case that government, community are going to buy in and feel part of. I think for me that is a reflection that I would like to carry, and I trust the collective wisdom that is in this room to continue building the knowledge to keep informing the design of people-centered CRVS gender-sensitive systems. And take advantage of our presence in countries. We are present in more than 150 countries. We have history of connecting with not only national statistical offices, but with most of the ministries that we have been discussing here. Today I can land in Mauritius, I will knock to the door of the Minister of Finance, and I will be received. I can go to Ethiopia, and I will go to the African Union, and I can ask an audience to the Commissioner for Social Affairs, and I will be received. So take advantage of the presence of the UN system in general, at country level, to connect to reality, and of course, the government or colleagues who are present here. I think for me, that is the takeaway, and we have a good opportunity. Our community exists, so let's continue building it up. And we are having this meeting in a country where the expression of feminism is explicit. So how do we push the gender equality? We say that in the SDGs, it is not only looking at SDG 5, but across the 17 goals. So for me, that is the main takeaway. And having said that, once again, I would like to thank the Center of Excellence, IDRC, for the excellent, I think, meeting that we had during these 2 days, the colleagues who worked on that, and of course, the support of Global Affairs Canada to this, and the staff, the interpreters, and the catering that we had here. So what is happening with the snow, we are ready to ski and cope. Thank you very much, and then wishing all of us a safe journey, and then thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Benoit. Joshua, it was a pleasure to have you yesterday in the morning. Now it's a pleasure again to have you at the end to give us a repeat of those inspiring words you gave us yesterday. So the floor is yours.
I think what you probably want are my personal reflections on how timely our airplanes depart in a snowstorm. I think that that's probably what the room is looking for. So in my experience, planes depart on time much more often here than they do in other countries when there's a snowstorm, but sometimes there are delays. It's pretty easy for planes to take off in a snowstorm. It's harder for them to land, and so the later the day goes, sometimes there are delays because incoming planes are delayed. It just depends. So you won't know anything by looking and searching now. It's going to be only tomorrow when the movements start happening. I have a plane at 6:30 with my 3 children tomorrow morning, and so obviously they're very interested to know whether I can predict if their plane will leave on time. I can't for myself, for them, and I can't for you. But enjoy the snow. It will be beautiful tonight and tomorrow morning if you're delayed, so try to get out and walk around a little bit. Ottawa looks its best when it's covered in a blanket of white snow. Okay, more seriously, even with a snowstorm, the room is still full, and that's fantastic. I've been in and out, as you know. One of the real advantages for having this event here is that I'm able to bring the discussion outside the walls a little bit, and I think that's a challenge that we're struggling with. There were no CRVS skeptics in the room here. The challenge is, how do we take the knowledge of what we've learned, that CRVS is not just a technical systems issue. It is about people. It is about understanding barriers and bringing that outside. By having you here, I was able to brief my deputy minister on what's going on. I was able to brief the parliamentary secretary and have her. And then I spent about an hour with Minister Gould briefing her, she's our Minister of International Development, on why this is important, why this matters, why it matters for vulnerable women and girls in particular. And so I'm able to get our senior champions excited. And if we hadn't had an event like this, I wouldn't have had that same opportunity. So thank you for coming to Ottawa, not just for the knowledge you've produced, but for me being able to then use that event to make sure that I get greater commitment from the Government of Canada on an ongoing basis. So that's great. I had people, though, who were here, and they've asked me to say a few things in terms of key takeaways. And so let me try this on. As we think about those human dimensions and bringing it outside the walls to make sure that every government accepts why they need to count every person to ensure that they count on an ongoing basis, just 2 or 3 reflections about what matters. And Tracy in particular was very helpful in sort of walking me through this before. So first, this idea of inclusive and coherent government as a necessary foundation for CRVS systems to function, and that challenge for so many countries. And that we have to go beyond just the CRVS system to address the country dynamics that can sustain progress. So legal reforms for non-discriminatory laws, participatory approaches to create space for CSOs, particular youth and women's groups to engage in the CRVS discussions, to ensure that we're capturing that human element and really understanding the barriers. And then I love this idea of finding champions for CRVS, and I think this links directly to what Benoit was saying, that to really mobilize a government minister, we have to be able to talk about return on investment. What does this data mean for helping them deliver on their mandate and changing the lives of their constituents? And I think that's the kind of examples that we want to get to, and Benoit listed a number of things about how that connection can be made. Tracy was filling me in on the discussion that touched on Paraguay and unintended pregnancies. I mean, that's fantastic and very compelling information, I think. And so as we get more and more sophisticated in telling these stories about the value and impact that CRVS can have on vulnerable populations, I think more and more we can ensure that this becomes a mainstream part of development discourse. I think there was also a recognition that there is still an opportunity for more research into this space. And so we can keep investing in systems, but if we don't actually understand and have evidence about the specific barriers that are presenting the sort of deepening and broadening of scope and impact, we might be investing in the wrong thing. So as we continue to work, we also have to make sure we're working on the right things, and research is a key to unlock that. So as we were preparing for the remarks I offered yesterday morning, we wanted to draw on lessons from our 10 years of programming in CRVS. And one of our best moments was when we reached out to country programs in global affairs that have been working on CRVS for multiple years in partner countries with high degrees of fragility. And we said, great, tell us some of your successes, your best practices, your lessons. And first, they just didn't answer us. And then when we pursued them a little bit more, they said, we're having a really hard time, not just achieving concrete impact, but really even understanding what we should do next. And so I'm sharing sort of secrets out of school here. Don't tweet this, please. But just to say, we're really only recognizing how much deeper the challenge is in situations of acute fragility. We set out feeling like we would be able to build those systems with partner governments in a way that was probably a bit naive, no surprise. I think what we're learning is that it takes a great deal of patience and a lowering of expectations as we try to balance the dual responsibilities of helping countries respond to acute needs while they're also building systems that can be sustainable through a transition period. And working in countries where there are pockets of highly stable areas that are easy to count and pockets that are much more difficult to implement these systems. So our partner countries are asking us for a different kind of support, one that's much more flexible and attuned to their local context. And that's something that we're thinking through. And I say all this because I think the next piece in the Center of Excellence is Gender Knowledge Series, which is going to be on CRVS in fragile and conflict settings, is going to be so valuable, not just for us inside global affairs, I know it will be for us, but hopefully for all of you as well and for the partner countries that we're working on. It feels like we're still really searching for the right solutions in those settings, so hopefully this will be an important part of the puzzle. I'm looking forward to reading it. And maybe a final one, this directory of CRVS experts that's going to be coming online this spring, I think will be a really interesting global good that'll help connect this community even further. And so these events are essential for us to make sure that we maintain momentum and bring the message into the different spheres where we all have influence. But making sure that we develop a tool to stay connected is going to be very useful as well. So that's also a great development, and I'm very happy to learn of it. So I'm going to close just to say thank you very much, Montasser, to the Center of Excellence in particular for this excellent event, to UNFPA, to Open Data Watch, for really helping organize a splendid discussion over the last 2 days. We think that this has successfully built on the momentum that was created 2 years ago. I think right now the task for us is, again, to use the knowledge and the networks to take this further, whether that's in the UN Statistical Commission, we're going to be bringing it into CSW, the Gender Equality Forums, we'll bring this to Mexico City, we'll bring it to Paris this summer, because, again, we need to make concrete progress on gender, on CRVS, and, of course, in support of the SDGs by 2030. So thank you. Safe travels.